Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Nikkii Bergstresser. She is here to celebrate Seasons for Stones. You know, I mentioned that the Reading with Your Kids podcast was nominated for the iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award. Well, we're really excited because a member of our podcasting family, the Solve It for Kids podcast, that was birthed here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast, was just named the #1 podcast for home learning by alldigitalschool.com. We are really excited. The Solve It for Kids podcast is a great podcast that I host along with our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. It's a fantastic show, and you don't want to miss it. We interview astronauts, aquanauts, physicists, artists, scientists, composers. We've done it all. It's a great way to open kids up to the different STEM fields and STEM careers. You don't want to miss it. Check it out today. You can go to our website, solveitforkids.com. Joining us right now from right outside of Vancouver in British Columbia in the beautiful nation of Canada. She's here to celebrate her brand new picture book, Seasons for Stones. Please welcome to the show, Nikkii Bergstresser. Nikkii, how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
I'm really looking forward to having you on the show. I had a chance to check out your website and check out the book trailer for Seasons for Stones. It's a book that is near and dear to my heart. I just love the theme of this book. Tell us all about it.
Thank you so much. Well, this book is about Tilly, and in the start of the story, Tilly has a really heavy heart because she knows her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Miller, is not doing well. And so instead of feeling helpless, Tilly decides to be helpful, and she starts doing little acts of kindness for Mrs. Miller and finds herself leaving stones outside Mrs. Miller's porch with positive words on them just to try and encourage her neighbor. And because of that, it's a catalyst where all the other people in the neighborhood start seeing Tilly contributing through her kindness and her positive words. And they, in turn, start to do things around their neighborhood to help out, too. And through it all, Tilly and Mrs. Miller, just through a love of nature, they develop a really special friendship together.
That's really beautiful, and I love that story. And it's, you know, obviously I'm assuming it's a work of fiction, but there's so much truth to that's inside the story. How simple acts of kindness can be so very powerful.
It is, definitely. And about 6 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and I lived several provinces away from him and had 2 little kids at the time, so I wasn't able to go and help him or be there physically to just give support. And so I decided, because my dad loved nature and he loves writing as well, I decided to paint on a stone a word for him. And every day of his treatment, he would pull that word out of a little burlap sack, and that would be his word to focus on for the day.
Whoa, what neat inspiration for the book.
Yeah, it was, and that came about my desire to write this story because I also saw my parents' neighbors really lend a hand when they saw what my parents were going through. And they just were shoveling their driveway and bringing them things. And it reminded me of how just those small little things of kindness can really make a difference in the lives of others.
And I love that. And and I love that this book encourages kids to think in this way, to empower them, because I think it's a really important skill to teach the kids, and I think the time to teach it to kids is when they're young, to really instill that so that they can carry it through their lifetime.
It is, and I really hope families could use Seasons for Stones as like a springboard for discussions about how they can make a difference in the lives of their friends or their neighbors or their community. And it doesn't have to be big things. It could be simple things like, making a card or giving a smile. And I think it's important for kids to realize that, some seasons of our lives are going to be hard. And just to how they can be that encouragement to the people around them, so that when they're maybe going through a hard season too, they can draw on that knowledge of the power of words, the power of kindness.
One of the other things that I really love about this is that Tilly has a connection. Obviously, her relationship with her neighbor grows. But Tilly, at the start of the book, Tilly already has that connection with this neighbor. And I think that's a really important message for families. I'm hoping that when a family sits down and reads this book, that a parent might take the time to think and to ask themselves, are we connected with our neighbors? Do my kids know their neighbors? And if the answer is no, or if the answer is, well, not really, I would encourage them to fix that, because I think connections with our neighbors are so very important.
It is important, and I think during this season with COVID, our family has experienced that in a special way too. We would go outside and bang pots to celebrate our healthcare workers, and it would be at 7:00 every night. And so we would set our alarm, and soon other neighbors started to come out and join, and we started to meet neighbors that we have lived near for years that we had never met before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so now I find my daughters, they go outside and they're able to visit with these neighbors and call them by name, and then we can be there for each other and support each other. So I think as a family, it's really important to encourage that connecting in the neighborhood. Exactly.
Yeah, because that is one of the things that COVID really has shown a spotlight on. My wife is a teacher here in Boston, and one of the biggest challenges for a lot of families is that they were suddenly presented with, the kids are staying home. There has to, they're going to be learning virtually. Well, if a parent's going out to work, a lot of parents, they didn't have any family and they didn't have any connections with neighbors that they felt safe enough to turn to. I'm hoping this has woken some of those folks up. I'm not sure it has, but I hope it has.
It does, and I think for us to just remember that it does take a village together, because it's so easy just to get into our house, in front of our screen or devices, and connect with people through that way. But having that genuine know your neighbors and see the people around you, I think it gives you empathy, and it gives you a responsibility for making a difference in other people's lives.
Yeah. And I think it helps you understand that you're not alone. It's with that feeling of loneliness can be, really difficult sometimes. It can make you feel helpless sometimes. I grew up in this inner city neighborhood where we knew everybody. Well, I should say everybody knew me. I couldn't get away with anything. Boy, oh boy, I was related to half the neighborhood, and I'd be doing something wrong and someone would come over and know my name. I'm like, how do you know me? And they'd be telling me that they're my cousin. But when my kids got older and they went to visit their friends, and some of the friends lived in apartment buildings, and my kids are coming home and they're saying, my friend doesn't know anybody who lives on her floor in her home. And, and they've been living there for years. And that just boggled my mind. I just don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've kind of got a reputation in our neighborhood for being the dog lady, and anytime someone finds a dog wandering, they tend to bring it to our house now. and so I've kind of got that reputation, and my husband laughs about that because the doorbell will ring, and sure enough, there's a kid out there saying, "Mrs. B, I can't find the collar on the dog," and so I will go out and we'll help, and we'll do a search, and we'll find the owners. Well, the one day I wasn't home, and the doorbell rang, and it was kids at the door with a dog, and my husband answered, and he goes, "Oh, great." Well, all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, maybe I will help." And so he went outside and he started to help, and he got connected with neighbors through that. So, there's all sorts of ways by just lending a helping hand and looking past ourselves that we can make true, genuine, and authentic connections.
I love what you just said, looking past ourselves. That seems to be a skill that we don't learn as much anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, I see that too, and I hope to instill that in my own kids, and I think those are kind of those lessons that are the best lessons and gifts to pass on to our children, is to have the empathy, to recognize what other people are going through, and just to be observant and aware of their feelings, of their situations. And I think then it gives us that fulfillment too, that we are making a difference. And it helps us just to kind of get out of our own head for a little bit too.
In Season for Stones, Tilly is presented with a challenge. It's hard for little kids knowing that somebody that they care about is ill and is not feeling well and may not survive. Were you hesitant at all at tackling this subject for a children's book?
I wasn't, because I just feel it needs to be told. I think kids really need to be able to have a way to understand the world around them, so that when they are presented with difficult situations, they aren't feeling quite that helpless. It's to have a book to be able to discuss as a family and talk about our feelings and recognize that, yeah, there are going to be times in our lives that are going to be really hard, or there's times for people we love who are close to us going through a hard time, and what can we do about that? How can we take steps forward? And it doesn't mean that we have to take big, huge leaps. It might mean that we just plan, what is our next step? How can we handle this? How can we encourage someone around us? So it's tough talking about these subjects, but I think it's really important, because then children can put words to their feelings and they can feel empowered.
Yeah. One of the things we talk about here on the show and remind parents is that reading together, or reading alone, it's kind of a way to prepare for life. It kind of lets kids visualize themselves in difficult situations, in different situations, and kind of play in their head how they might deal with those situations before they actually face them in real life.
It is, exactly. And I really wanted to write a picture book that's intergenerational. I think a relationship between a child and an elderly person or senior citizen, I think there's so much value for each party involved. I think for the child, they can just, have that safe place to be able to learn from an older person in their lives. And I think the elderly person gets encouraged through the enthusiasm and the positive nature of the child. So I definitely think it's a relationship that's win-win for both parties.
I agree. I'm curious. One of the things, my wife's family is originally from Puerto Rico, and we love visiting Latin American countries, and we have a lot of folks from different Latin cultures here in our lives in Boston. And one of the biggest differences that I noticed between the Latin cultures and the population at large here in the Boston area and around the United States is that in the Latin cultures, it's much more common to see that intergenerational interactions together. It's very common to go to a festival and see grandparents with grandchildren and adults and teenagers, and teenagers with their parents, teenagers with their grandparents at a carnival, at a fair. I mean, you just don't see that and the population at large here in the States. What's it like in your part of Canada? Are there more intergenerational relationships? Do families, extended families do more together in your country?
I think, you know what, there's definitely a cultural aspect with that where we live, and I do see that, and I see a lot of people who have grown up in the same area for their whole entire lives. My husband and myself, we moved away from all our family, and it was really hard being out here when we had our two little girls without that support. But we reached out and we connected with people through our church. And my parents did an amazing job of writing cards to the girls or FaceTiming them, Skyping them, talking to them on the phone. And we just made that effort. But it's hard when you don't have that family connection. And I think it's fabulous for those that do. And in Canada here, there are different pockets of culturally diverse groups that they really place that importance on having the entire family even in the same house, the grandparents, the cousins, the aunts, uncles, and everyone.
Yeah. And the only drawback to that I've ever experienced in my life, I know that's a lot of those families were hit hard when COVID first came into our lives. But this is a once in a millennia thing, so I don't think it should discourage big extended families from being together. One of the things that and this is off the subject of your book, and we'll get right back to Seasons for Stones in a minute, but Canada has this reputation for being so friendly, and I've traveled through all of the eastern provinces of Canada, and it is, the people are incredibly friendly and polite. Where does that come from?
I think it comes from a connection with family. I really honestly do, and just the small communities. I think that's huge as well. When I grew up in a small town where we never locked our doors, you didn't lock your car doors at all, and you knew everybody. And I think that it broke down walls or barriers, and I think that's what makes Canadians really special.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I love Canada. It's a beautiful country, and it's huge. People, I was talking to my niece the other night, and it is just, the landmass, it's really hard to comprehend how huge it is.
Mm-hmm. It is. It definitely is. And so then, you do get smaller areas of towns and everything all over the place. As well, I think Canadians, we really respect diversity, and we embrace it. And that, to me, is something I have valued about living here, too.
That's wonderful. Hey, we need to give a shout-out to your illustrator. Tell us who she is.
Yes. Okay, her name is Kelly O'Neill. And the fun part about writing a picture book is leaving room for the illustrator's vision as well. And I loved what Kelly did. And the funny part when you write a picture book is you never actually get to meet the illustrator. It's rare. And when my publisher presented me with some of Kelly's samples of her illustrations, I just fell in love with the way she put such charm into her characters. And when I had talked a little bit about how I envisioned Tilly, I was so happy with how she created Tilly and all the things that she incorporated into Seasons for Stones.
Yeah. I bet you a lot of people are really surprised when they hear that there's not more of a direct collaboration between author and illustrator during the creation process.
I know a lot of people I've talked to were very surprised with that. They're like, what do you mean you don't get to choose things? But I think it's a great aspect of telling a story, because when you leave that room for the illustration and the illustrator's vision, it brings in their ideas and it adds to the story that you're wanting to tell. It's nerve-wracking at first when you think you're giving this baby story that it's part of your heart, you're giving it over to someone to illustrate. It can be stressful, but it's been a beautiful process. So.
Well, that's really wonderful. And Season for Stones is your debut picture book, so I'm imagining you had to learn quickly how to let go of that, that part of the process.
I did, exactly. And I have another picture book coming out with Cardinal Rule Press in October of 2021. And again, that was the same thing too, just to let go of what I hold so close and to realize that, the publisher and the illustrator, they want to do the best job with your story as well. And I do love that team effort. I really have enjoyed the process.
That's wonderful. And it's wonderful that we have a great reason to invite you back on the show next year to celebrate the new book.
I would love that. Yes, Lila Lou's Little Library is with Cardinal Rule Press, and Lila Lou loves books, and in fact, she loves them so much. She has way too many books in her house, and she has to come up with some creative ways to share her love of books.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait. In the meantime, let everybody know where they can find you online.
Sure. They can find me on my website, NikkieBergstresser.com. And if you go on there, I've got links to some videos and my YouTube channel, as well as my social media.
Well, we've had such a great time speaking to the author of Season for Stones, a beautiful new picture book with a great message from our guest, Nikkii Bergstresser. Hey, Nikkii, thanks so much for sharing this time with us today.
Thank you so much, Jedley. I really appreciated our visit, and I appreciate your support with all the picture book authors that you have been sharing on your podcast.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Stephen Wonderly. He'll be here to celebrate Dear Moon. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Are you the author of a fantastic children's book? We would love to have you as a guest on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic book, and best of all, it's free. You do not need to pay a cent to be a guest on the show. You do not need to pay anybody to facilitate your appearance on the show. Being a guest is fun, it's easy, and it is free. All you need to do is to go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll down to where it says Be a Guest. You'll find out all about it. Oh, you'll also be able to find out about our Certified Great Read program. A great program with lots of great tools and great ways to help your book stand out from the crowd of books that are published every single month. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Nikkii Bergstresser. We also want to thank my team, starting with my amazing daughter, Alejandra Doherty, my fabulous producer, Fatima Khan, my awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cuddo. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. But most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much. You've been doing so much for your kids. You've been their teacher, their nurse, their playmate, the only friend that they can hang out with during this pandemic. And you're doing it all with style, with flair, with grace. And you're doing it to make the world a better place. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.